Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 788, the Canadian Grand Prix review. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know what we do on race weekends. Yep.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. But before doing that, of course, I have to actually get somebody that knows what they're talking about when you talk about driving and racing. What better than to go actually get a real race car driver?
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul, how you doing?
I'm okay. I'm a little beaten and bruised, quite honestly.
Yeah, you were doing a little karting action this weekend.
Oh, man. I was in the wars this weekend is what I was.
Were you putting youngsters into the wall?
No, they put me in the wall, actually, in the end. And then I had to kick the youngsters' ass in the pit lane. Oh, my God. It was crazy.
Wow.
You do you do practices, you do a quali, then you do a qualifying race, because everyone loves a qualifying race before the real race.
Yeah.
So a qualifying race, a guy spins in front of me right in the second turn. Boom, I hit him and I'm done. Right. So have to start in the back for the main race. And then so start the back, then there's just a melee in front of me at the start. So I think I passed like 6-7 carts at the same in turn one or something, turn two. Some people that were pretty fast, and so got up to wherever I did, 7th or 8th or something, and then so going through a lap or so, then some couple of kids close in on me, and then I turn in, and then they punt me. I spin, and then the other guy launches over my tire and lands on top of me. So I've got a cart right on my head. And then so I push him off, and then I get going again. But now I'm honestly, the thing's already squashed the exhaust, and I'm kind of screwed as it is at that point. So the next couple of guys catch me, the guys that we were involved in this melee with and decide to where we're going down to a hairpin, and we're coming down side by side, and he just completely drills me on the left side and punts me off the track. I'm in the barriers and all that kind of good stuff.
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough.
That's not good enough.
I don't swear very often, Todd, but when I got back to I'd finished the race, but with a broken car basically, and I used a lot of swear words I hadn't used in a very long time.
I bet.
I was very angry.
Gosh, you were like Lewis Hamilton and Monza with Max on top of you.
Yeah. I had to go to the stewards. I got him friggin' disqualified, and his dad comes up to me, and I'm like, no, don't
go there. You ain't that guy, pal. You ain't that guy.
do not. This is end this now. So there you go. The karting wars of Charlesley on Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, by the way.
Yeah, happy Father's Day
to you and everybody else.
Yeah.
So my Father's Day Sunday was spent just kind of smoldering with anger over the whole process.
Isn't it the way? You just you want to have fun, do a hobby, go out there, do a little karting, get your chops back, get out there, get put in the wall, and by a bunch of youngsters.
Yeah, well, I guess it was there's the big national whatever race next week at the same track, and so everyone was there, so it was massive field and all this kind of stuff, but so everyone was trying to work their way into Formula One.
No
one has a hope, mind you. But come back, my wife's like, wasn't this a normal race weekend for you? Went on. Touring car driver often has these issues too, but I never had anyone on top of my head, I must say.
Right.
I did come back with a few more bruises.
Well, thankfully, your James Hunt inspired Bell helmet came in handy.
Yeah, it was okay. The helmet is okay. I did check the helmet. The engine and stuff and the exhaust were a little bent, and they're being fixed right now. But just makes me more inspired to come back and kick their asses next time.
Absolutely.
So. Anywho, that was my weekend.
That's crazy. That's a crazy weekend for Father's Day. Well, that's crazy. Hey, speaking of crazy weekends, we had a race up in the Great White North.
Thank goodness, right? Finally.
Yes, in Montreal after 3 years or whatever it is.
Yeah,
it's a long wait, man. Yeah. That's a long wait to go such a fun track. You know?
And for that crowd to hang back
Yeah.
and just watch everyone else racing for that many years.
I
Yeah,
know.
for sure.
I know. I felt bad for the Canadian fans,
Yeah.
F1 fans up there, having to wait
Mhm.
so long. But look, they had that whole wet and changing conditions during qualifying. That meant you had a 40-year-old on the front row for the first time since Nigel Mansell in 1994.
Fighting like a bull.
Yes,
Yes.
he was. Yes, that was good. Plus the
That was
changing
awesome.
condition. Sergio just kind of ragged weekend going there a little bit.
Hmm.
He had that crash in quali. He was down at 13th. And then, if Baku wasn't bad enough for Charles Leclerc, with a DNF, then he walks into this race weekend. We need a fourth engine. And now he starts in the back. And,
Yeah.
Ultimately what you had is a grid of a lot of different cars out of position, typically, right? And
Hmm.
so, certainly a lot of talk about Sergio and Charles coming back through the field, which Sergio unfortunately never really did. And Charles did, but it was super late.
Yeah.
But it did add some real complexity on strategy when you threw in a couple virtual safety cars, an actual safety car, just a lot of on the fly strategy playing, and from all teams, not just Red Bull who won, but just from a lot of the teams making those strategy calls in real
Right. Right.
time.
There's a lot of variety for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and there was a point, and even though I wouldn't say that, come mid race that it was this prolific passing, just edge your seat, I was incredibly intrigued watching lap times versus virtual safety cars versus strategies, one
Hmm.
stop versus two stop, and I bet as a sporting manager for a racing team, I bet you were sitting there thinking, "Oh man, the strategies are going to get crazy,"
Yeah.
and they did.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. And, obviously we're a lot, we need a lot of information to really figure it out for ourselves, what everyone's doing, which we generally don't do. But this one was fairly good to follow at the front. So we did get a good picture of what everyone was doing, what Sainz was doing, what Verstappen was doing.
Yeah.
So it did make it quite fun to see the ebb and flow of the pace versus the tire life versus the new tire versus the old tire, etc. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was a great race, I thought.
It was interesting, and I'll talk about it when we get to Ferrari. But the cameras would move around, and they'd show a lot of midfield battles for the right reasons, because there was like 3, 4 cars that are all bunched up and trying to pass. And
Yeah.
and I'm not knocking the broadcast, but I'm just saying that the camera's moving around, a lot of different battles up and down the field. They're trying to find close action. I totally understand that. But I found myself thinking, oh, Max, he's out, he's in the lead. No, you see the lead now, it's Carlos. And then you got both Mercedes up into the mix, and you're thinking,
Right.
but the race was always, even with 2 virtual safety cars and a real one, the race was always between Max and Carlos, and they knew it
Hmm.
even when they were boxed and out of position.
Yep.
But ultimately, Ferrari read that, and so did Red Bull. Conversely, they marked each other, and they knew exactly what they were doing as they moved through the field, took
Hmm.
advantage of virtual safety car or didn't, and
Yep.
then it
And I,
ultimately
and I
was
would
over.
say, yeah, definitely. And I would actually say Ferrari played it a little better,
Yeah.
but the result just didn't come from it.
Right, 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 right. Well, let's jump in. Let's talk about the race and how it finished. We'll start off at the top at Red Bull. You had Sergio Perez, unfortunately, a DNF, and Max Verstappen taking the win in Canada. Max led from the start, chose to box early under that first virtual safety car pole. Then he ceded the lead to Carlos Sainz at that time, but he regained it once Carlos boxed.
Mhm.
Even though they were separated by other cars and slightly out of sync. Ultimately, they were racing each other the entire race. And as the pit stop strategy began sorting themselves out, it would be the full safety car that would bring them nose to tail for the last, 10 plus laps.
Yeah.
And the last 10 laps was just a terrific, in my mind, and I'm not a professional driver, but it was just a terrific example of defending, of attacking, of a DRS fueled frustration, and just a clinical driving from Max to take the win, an even bigger lead in the Drivers' Championship. Ultimately, and if I'm wrong on this, Paul, let me know. It seemed to me Max pretty much knew exactly where Carlos and the Ferrari were stronger.
Mhm.
Ferrari were taking more curb than Red Bull, but Red Bull had that traction out of the final turn, and it's that traction and his battery store and where he
Mhm.
charged and where he deployed. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't want to overplay it, but it seemed incredibly clinical.
It was, and there's a lot going on You know, it's not just Max driving around trying to drive his arse off, which he was, but he also had to be very intelligent on how to use the battery power. That's a key element, right? They know what tools they have that are kind of stationary, which is their aero, their top speed, etc. But there is some things to play around with there. Also some coy driving with maybe overslowing a couple of places where you know you're not under attack to be able to regenerate while not putting yourself at risk, and then using that power at the right place and to fight off Carlos Sainz, who was ultimately on a better tire in a probably a faster car at that point, but somehow Max, didn't make an error. I mean, we can say Max is a super fast driver. Oh, your camera went off again.
Oh, not again. Hold on. All right. Apology, folks. I have to figure out my camera. It works fine, looks fine, and then about a little ways into the podcast, it dies. So sorry about that.
It's a millennial. It's lazy.
Right. Said the Gen Xers. Yeah. So had to switch and get my different camera. So my day job. So anyway, apologies. Yes. So clinical, executed incredibly well. Like you said, Ferrari read it well, but we'll get into Ferrari in a minute.
Yep.
And they took. I think the question mark for me is when they dove Max in on that first virtual safety car.
That was a couple of cojones right there to do that.
That was gutsy, wasn't it?
To pit your car while in the lead was very gutsy. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was too, and I thought, man, I don't know if that gamble's going to play out because you ceded that lead, and then Carlos returns a favor, and I thought, wow.
They obviously had a big plan ahead of time, and they played it the way they wrote it. Basically, they weren't doing that on the wing. They were like, this is how we foresee the race coming out, and this is what we're going to do to protect ourselves from the Ferrari. Yeah,
it was good. Sergio, not a great weekend for him, as I mentioned. Crashed during qualifying, put him down at P13, starting in the back. He had a lot of work to make up. Unfortunately, that ragged weekend ended up in a DNF due to gearbox issue, not his fault. It's not the result he needed, though, as he's very much in the championship hunt, but he does take a blow there, and he's fighting Leclerc for P2 in that championship, and Leclerc managed to come all the way back and score points.
Right.
So,
that was important. I mean, he could have made big points ahead of Leclerc. So
he could have really eroded some of that Leclerc lead. But Sergio felt it, and it was a shame. He said he felt like he had the pace to make his way forward and in big points. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be for that. It was a tough weekend. And they are going to have to look at that. I don't know if that's just an isolated, that's an older gearbox, and maybe it's sort of a one-off. And I would think it would make them nervous. But, it does bump up against that Ferrari taking its fourth engine. And you and I have talked about this in the past. With this many races this season, I just don't think the 3-engine rule is a good idea.
It's not even close to doable. And everyone's going to be there at some point.
Yep.
Maybe it's not a bad idea to do it at a track where you can actually pass at, even premeditated engine change. Because basically you take the engine change, you put that in the pile, even if the third engine isn't toast.
Right.
You put that back in the pile, because there's definitely a strategy to taking these penalties, because everyone's definitely going to have to do it. You don't want to get to a very pivotal part of the championship and find you got a grid penalty and you're at a track where you're just going to be stuck like Hungary or somewhere like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a tough call, and I think I don't think 3 is enough for the season like this, and I don't know if it's 4 or 5, but it's because then we end up with all these random engine penalties and gearbox penalties, and I don't know. It's just sort of an artificial impact.
I always talk to my dad after the races, and he just gripes and grumbles about that stuff. So what the hell are they doing? When we were racing, we'd have a qualifying engine and a race engine, and we'd just switch them back and forth and send one back off to be fixed, while the other one was being put in the car. It's like, I don't know what their problem is. So.
Is that back in the Aeros days?
No, well, that was back when because he was in the IMSA days, right?
Yeah,
so he used to run the Porsches in IMSA, and Porsche engines notoriously don't last very long. You always switch them out, but you literally would have your qualifying engine, your race motor. Your race motor will go to your practice for the next event, and then you put a new engine in for qualifying, and they just keep going
Yeah.
there. And there was planes flying back and forth to Germany rebuilding IMSA engines.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, all right, talk about Ferrari. Charles Leclerc P5, Carlos Sainz P2. Leclerc started towards the back because he had to take that engine penalty. Let's start with Carlos. So got by Alonso early on, was running there or thereabouts. As far as lap times, to stay within striking range. And I wouldn't say, I was curious if Max pulled out beyond DRS, but it wasn't like he had a 20-second lead on him at some point. I think Carlos is thereabouts.
Yeah.
Which kind of told me that the Ferrari's pretty handy around Canada, and should have foreshadowed what was to come. But it was that second virtual safety car that allowed Carlos to match Max earlier free stop that Max got, and as it was later, it would allow him to stay on this sort of one-stop strategy that he was doing. But it was the full safety car that presented Ferrari the strategy conundrum. Do they keep him out on old tires with Max on fresh tires behind him, or do they box, cede the lead, and try to take the fight to Max? They opted the latter, which in my mind was the right call, because had he stayed out, he most likely would have been a target for not just Max, but more than likely Lewis too, as both of them were on fresher tires. So they kind of had to do that to get him in the hunt. As it was, Carlos hounded Max for the last 10, 16 laps, and threw everything, including the kitchen sink he had at the Dutchman, which made for a super exciting finish. I think Max finished, 0.9 of a second, ahead of Carlos. So great race, very, very tough, but yeah, just didn't quite have it. And he closed up every time on that back straight and just couldn't get the gain he needed in order to neutralize Max's traction out of that last corner. So as you're looking at that, Paul, from a driver's perspective, if Max has just got that edge coming out of that final corner, you're going to have to try something else. And I'm not saying that Carlos did.
Yeah. I mean, you got to try something else somewhere else.
Yeah.
Technically, it's tough. Carlos is a great driver. I guess I in my mind, I feel like there's just a couple of things missing right now, not necessarily forever. He hasn't won a race yet. When you win a race, you find out, okay, that's how you win a race. And Charles Leclerc's done that. I feel like if Charles was in that same position, he would have had a better chance of pulling it off than Carlos did. But Carlos is, you got to think of the season as a whole. Carlos has had some bad races. He's had some wrecks, and that all comes into his mind. He's not going to make that little 110% commitment into a turn to pass Max Verstappen. Because for Carlos Sainz, him finishing second is better than him not finishing at all.
Yeah, right.
So all these things always come into your mind when you're out there driving. And I think it was just that little bit missing, maybe hesitation, maybe playing it safe a little bit, that didn't really, Max really had to open an opportunity for Carlos, and Carlos didn't force an opportunity for himself. And so just kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit, but didn't really make any significant move to really make it happen.
Yeah.
As you said, rightly, coming off the hairpin turn, that Max had an advantage. So you got to figure out, okay, I'm never going to do it here. I'm not going to late break him into the hairpin and pull it around, although that's what Carlos was trying. I've got to try to do something different somewhere else that he's not expecting. And I don't think Carlos had that box of tools in his vehicle at that moment.
Yeah, and if he was trying to, put a lot of pressure on Max and force a mistake, unfortunately, Max didn't make one.
Yeah, he doesn't do that very often anymore.
Yeah. So that was pretty tough for Charles. He had a much more frustrating race starting at the back. He got stuck behind a few DRS trains, despite his trimmed out rear wing that Ferrari gave him to make passing easier. Didn't really help. He got hung up back there behind Ocon forever and was so frustrated. Ultimately, he boxed and had some really good passes then with fresh tires to claw back to fifth. And it just left me wondering what he might have achieved had they had the luxury of a better strategy and maybe cleaner air to run in. And in hindsight, should they have boxed him under either of the virtual safety cars or not, you know?
Yeah, I don't
But
think so.
it would have brought him back out into traffic anyway on either one of
Yeah,
those, I think.
I feel, I mean, the big question is, what if he had got by an Ocon? That's
Yeah.
ultimately what had to happen. I
Yeah.
think the way they played the strategy was probably the best they could. The only thing missing was that he wasn't able to get past Ocon, and he spent so much time behind there. If he'd have got by him very super quick, then I think he was on for a podium, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, I do too.
But because he didn't, and he was stuck behind there, and any life in those tires was used up by following another car, he just kind of, lost a lot of time on track for that.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. Let's talk about Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton P3 back on the podium for Lewis. George Russell. Woo! Exactly. You know what I say to that. I've got something for that if I can find it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get in there, Lewis.
Get in there.
Yeah.
Lewis. There you go.
Because we never give up unless
never give up.
we're at a race where we're 3 laps in and we feel despondent, and then we do give up.
All right. Yeah.
Apart from that, we never give up as a
Never
team.
give up. So yeah, Lewis, great to see him on the podium. George Russell in P4. Mercedes went. Now this is, I'll have to unpack this on different podcasts because this whole technical directive thing is just intriguing, very intriguing. Because it was issued. There's all of this drama, apparently a heated team boss meeting with headlines saying Toto Wolff loses his S, and a team boss meeting. And it wasn't just Christian and Toto. Mattia Binotto was on the same side as Christian, telling Toto to sort his own house before you start coming and telling me about my cars and my drivers, right? And so it was interesting. But this technical directive, the other issue is that the attorney that oversaw the technical directive happens to be Toto's former personal lawyer. And then they said you could have 2 stays on your floor. And that directive came out Thursday. Friday, Mercedes shows up with 2 stays, and the other teams are going, wait a minute. This came out on Thursday evening, and on Friday morning, you have 2 stays. There's no way you could have produced that quick.
He had the guy out in the Holiday Inn Express down in the laundry room, banging a piece.
Right. Filing it down. It's like, I don't know.
Give me a coat hanger.
Yeah, so I'm not saying anything, but there is certainly a lot of tongues wagging over the issue, and that will impact that later. It's political as hell. So anyway, Mercedes went from, it was interesting, on Friday, Lewis calling the car completely undrivable, right? And to a car that Toto then said on Sunday after the race that they raised it. And it bounced less. It didn't stop bouncing, but it bounced less and had enough performance still to launch itself back up to the 3rd fastest car in the grid, which is great for Mercedes. That's quite a turnaround given Lewis's comments about the car earlier in the weekend. So it's great to see them start to make some of the changes that are positive for a change in performance anyway. Lewis and George had different rear wing packages. That allowed Lewis to stay pretty, I wouldn't say he was hounding the leaders, but he was within contact, while George came back through the field from 8th, because that's where he started. So given the 2 virtual safety cars, it did look like the 2 would end up battling each other, but the team chose to box George again just to be safe, which kind of set their running order. So there was a little bit of the back and forth of how that played out. And ultimately, the good news is that Lewis had the leaders in sight, even at the end, and at times was on pace with the 2 leaders. Now, in fairness, that's because Carlos and Max were putting a hell of a lot more energy in their tires than he was, battling each other and fighting. Still allowed Lewis to stay in the tow. I think that's great. And it's good. Lewis is super excited to be back on the podium, as he should be. Feels like that's a victory considering where they started the season. And I thought, it's just sort of a testament. It's like, well, Lewis, he's just mentally all checked out and everything. Well, I don't know. This car operated and performed quite a bit different than the other races, and he executed.
Yeah, it's interesting because they're saying now that Mercedes is saying, well, we've fixed our porpoising issue. Our problem is we need the car to be lower to get the performance out of it, which is kind of what we knew already.
Yeah, right.
You know, we knew that answer. Yes, you raise the car and you're gonna, you know, not be porpoising, and Lewis's back is going to be intact. But you know, how much performance do you lose, or you're willing to lose by raising it up to make it actually a drivable car
Right.
for the pilots inside the car? So, yeah, there's been a lot said about, you know, the porpoising and how do we change the rules, and everyone has to do it. But fundamentally, as I said again, you know, we spoke about last time, was that it's a Mercedes design issue that has them grumbling, and they have to fix it. And yes, they need the car lower to get the performance out of it, and they can't lower it because they get the porpoising. So it's the other vehicles have some of that, but they don't have it to the extent that Mercedes have. So it's up to Mercedes to fix it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, clearly Red Bull isn't struggling with that anywhere near that.
No, and everyone's driving under the same rules. Let's not change the rules just to fix someone else's problem. Let's have them go out there and fix it. A lot of people have been chasing Mercedes for a very long time.
Yep.
So I'm okay with Mercedes having to chase somebody else and try to engineer their car to get the pace out of it, which I feel they probably will eventually. Maybe this isn't their year, but I think probably by the end of the year they're going to be right there with the other two teams. They've just started on their back foot, which they're not used to doing.
Yeah. And, you know, they had James Allison in a rare appearance at the Grand Prix. Normally he's back at base. So if he's the good luck charm, then I would say, you know, it's hard to believe that they're floundering all season long. James shows up and says, what the hell are you guys doing? No, this goes there, that goes there. Why are you having the two drivers monkey around while those we know how to race this? Set these cars up. What are you doing back here? You know, set everything up. But
so I mean, it was a good drive by Lewis, good drive by George. Bad decision by George in the qualifying, that's for sure. But
that's what I was going to say. George's part, the quality gamble hurt him on Sunday.
He doesn't. I'm not sure he's the best guy for this stuff. He's not. He's no Jenson Button right now, I don't think, because he's made a few mistakes in his short past in Formula One where he's trying to call something in the weather. I'm not saying he's got it wrong every time, but he's not, you know, the soothsayer of changeable conditions. I don't know.
And I think on, you know, that is what hurt him. And the mistake that he made on Saturday, Paul, he pretty much ceded the race and strategy to his teammate Lewis, which is something he'll have to consider going forward. I mean, the fact is, it's one thing if you're running with Red Bull and Ferrari and you want to take a little bit of a gamble because you think, well, changing condition, I'm going to take a gamble and nip pole, and I have the pace to hold the Red Bull and Ferraris off. Well, they clearly don't. So taking that gamble, okay, so you're like Alonso, you're out of position. You're going to get eaten up by Red Bull and Ferrari in quick order, you know?
Yeah, but that's not a reason to not do it.
Well, no, all the water on the track is the reason not to do it.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's always a good, you know, you always weigh things up, especially in those changeable conditions. Do you throw a Hail Mary or not? And what's the worst thing if you throw a Hail Mary? You're going to be back in 8th, 9th place, or you're going to be in 6th or 5th if you just kind of toe the line. Maybe it was worth a punt, but it didn't seem like it was even close to being worth a shot. You know, I don't mind people having to go, but I just don't think it was even close to being game on for any kind of a attempt on slick tires.
I don't either. That, you know, Jensen didn't agree with it, obviously, but I think in the whole grand scheme of things, his race isn't against Ferrari or Red Bull. His race is against Lewis. And gambling with that much water on the track, I mean, you're going to be starting back. You've got the second strategy, and you pretty much ceded that race and strategy to your teammate. But
it wasn't a disaster for him.
No, it was great. He finished 4th. Yeah.
Yep.
It was a great run back.
Still another top 5 finish. So in the end, George is probably like, I'm cool, man. Let's go.
Yeah, I don't think he's as hung up about it as I am. I'm just thinking, you know, you're kind of measured against your teammate, and they've got a good fight going on, and you know, you don't want to cede positions to your teammate. Max doesn't to Sergio, and Charles doesn't to Carlos. But anyway, but it was a great recovery from 8th up to 4th. Good result from Mercedes. Let's hope it's Mercedes, a recovering Mercedes, heading into the British Grand Prix. There are going to be a lot of fans there for Lewis and George, right? A lot of British fans, a lot of Lando fans. So hopefully Mercedes can carry that momentum going back to the British Grand Prix. A lot of local support. That'll be great to see. Alpine, Fernando Alonso down at P9, Esteban Ocon at P6. It's great to see Alonso starting P2, but realistically, Max wasn't his fight, and he said that. He said before the race, look, if it's an opportunity the first corner, I'll take it, but ultimately I'm fighting for P6. And that's where he was fighting for with his own teammate, But the team chose to run him on a long first stint and ignored the free stops of the virtual safety car. And when he finally boxed, he lost several positions. Then Ocon became the proverbial DRS train for Leclerc for most of the race, and later. Ocon dropped back to give Alonso some DRS to hold off the Alfa Romeo. So Alonso, and then unfortunately, Alonso got a penalty for trying a little too hard to hold off the Alfa Romeos and got a 5 second.
For nothing.
Yeah, right. So, but you could tell. I mean, Alonso was frustrated that he was behind Ocon. He was like, been quicker all weekend,
Yeah. It was frustrating to see Alonso left out there. Honestly, I mean, he did a great job. He did a great job in that first stint, I thought. And I think the call was wrong to leave him out. I don't know what they were trying to do exactly. But in the position where he was at the sharp end of the results, potentially, I don't think they needed to play that game at all. And I guess he had some kind of power issue that's why Ocon had to kind of fall back and DRS him out of threat from the Alfa Romeos, but which is a shame also. But I think the team kind of messed around too much, tried to be a little too clever with him. I don't think it was necessary.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. A good drive from Ocon, though. I mean,
it was. Absolutely.
Did a great job holding Leclerc behind him. And then marched his way up to P6. I think Alonso felt like he should have been P6, and unfortunately, I don't think the strategy, as you said, played in that role. But you can't deny Esteban had a great race.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he did. Yeah, he didn't put a step wrong and probably overachieved maybe.
Yeah, I agree. And look, it's not easy keeping a guy like Leclerc behind you.
No, it's kind of like Max and Carlos. He played that game really, really well, keeping Charles behind him. They're all sparring partners from the younger days, right? So I think they know what each other can do, and so I think that kind of helps a little bit as well.
Yeah, exactly. Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas in P7, Zhou Guanyu in P8. Bottas had a ragged weekend, so to kind of start. But then he started on the hards, and kudos to the strategy team. I think Ruth and team got it done really well here. He started on the hards, made it all the way to the safety car with a good strategy, as it turns out. And this made his race really kind of come alive, got him up into P7.
Out of nowhere.
Really. So the safety car was perfectly timed for Valtteri, no doubt. But, you got to make the call. And he drove well and just boop, showed up in P7. It's like, wow, there's Valtteri. And whoa, there's Zhou. Wow.
Well, Zhou was in the mix all the time, but Valtteri wasn't. And so, Valtteri to be ahead of Zhou was something. Sometimes it takes a whole race to see a strategy play out, right? But it did look like Valtteri was struggling. He went off there in the first turn or at the start of the race and lost some positions, and he just didn't look great. But Zhou did.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, Zhou was kind of in the same frustration that Charles was, where he was following and probably had a lot more pace and lost a lot of time on track in total because of that. But I think Zhou did a phenomenal job, actually.
Yeah, I do too. I thought he did a great job. Was passing, looked good.
Yeah.
Didn't put it a foot wrong. Was there. Just got caught out by Bottas because Bottas was on fresher tires. But other than that, is a fantastic thing. And given their Friday pace, it's really good to see them fighting with the Alpines. And Valtteri said that he kind of felt like they found the pace that they had earlier this season against the cars around him. And so that was a good sign as they head into Silverstone. So good for them.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Aston Martin. Lance Stroll, P10, Sebastian Vettel, P12. Seb struggled early with tire wear. He boxed really early, then made his second stop under a green flag, and this dropped him back into the order. From there, he had to make his second set of hards last for 51 laps and finish out of the points. So I think it was just that's just kind of one of those deals where Seb out of sequence, didn't take the free stops, safety car didn't really help, and then got it kind of caught out.
First rule of fight camp, take the free stop.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So yeah, it didn't really play out for him.
Yeah, no.
It was pretty tough. Lance, on the other hand, though, Paul, he had a different strategy, and for his home race, he ran a very long first stint, kind of like Valtteri did, and just missed out boxing during that safety car. And so that left him running a one-stopper to P10. Might have been even possibly a little better had he been able to stop, but really converted what looked like to be a pretty tough weekend into a pretty tidy race.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Vettel and Stroll kind of had alternate strategies completely.
Yeah.
And definitely played out. But Stroll actually did a great job, I thought, running that long stint. I mean, he had great pace throughout it, really, as Joe was frustrated by. So I think, it's his home race. I don't know if that makes a difference, but Stroll's an interesting character to me. He sometimes he looks hopeless when it's a normal race and normal things are happening. But you throw in rain or mixture, or sometimes he can pull it out, and you can see a semblance of a pretty darn good Formula One driver in this sometimes. And I think this is one of them. Even though it was only for one measly point, I think ultimately it was he did everything he could to and got some result out of it at least. Yeah,
I agree. I wonder if sometimes just. Because it does. Sometimes he seems to be, wow, that was impressive. Other times, like, well, yeah, I don't know. It was like, I don't know. It just seems kind of hot, cold. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just his personality. But sometimes I wonder if he's all in.
Yeah, true.
But anyway, McLaren, Lando Norris P15, Daniel Ricciardo P11. Tough weekend for Lando. Had to start on an older engine. Suffered a very slow pit stop with missing tires after the confusion of the stack stop. That was a bit of a clown show for a team like McLaren. Lando said he didn't think their pace was too bad, but they just couldn't pass. He said it just could not pass. And the DRS train was very strong in Canada, making you wonder really if maybe the DRS zones, if there weren't too many, or if the zones themselves are too long. And too powerful. But tough weekend for Lando. I was really hoping to kind of bounce back. Hated to see him finish down there in P15.
Yeah, I mean, the team overall made a bit of a hash of it.
Yeah.
They didn't really have pace. And they played the strategy wrong. So I don't know. And they had bad pit stops. I'm not sure how much worse it could have been for them unless they crashed out of the race. But maybe it would have been better. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there definitely wasn't a big party at the end on St. Catherine Street for the McLaren folks. I'm sure they went back and started scratching their heads. What the hell what the hell went wrong?
What just happened?
Yeah. And as you said with Mercedes, McLaren also going into the British Grand Prix would like some momentum, and they definitely had no momentum coming out of Canada.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Dan, unlucky, had a slow stop as well.
Yeah.
And later into the safety car, he boxed for fresh tires, but couldn't really make that option work either. In the end, didn't have pace, period. And Andreas, team boss, said that the team owed Dan and Lando an apology. It was just a bad weekend. Let's see. Where are we? Williams. Alex Albon, P13, Nicholas Latifi, hometown hero, Nicholas Latifi, P16. It's a shame for Albon. He was running 10th at one point, but struggled with tire wear and rear grip. Just couldn't keep the faster cars behind him. Got hung out by the safety car, and that dropped him back. I feel like, I don't know if points were on the table, but and I'm not. I'm not saying that P13 is miserable. I think he got out of the car what he could. It's just unfortunate timing with the safety car. Just didn't have the pace and grip in that Williams, but I still think delivered a really tidy race.
Yeah, absolutely. He got freight trained, not just by the safety car, by I can't remember when it was, but he was holding some people off, and then all of a sudden they all went railroaded.
They all
by
went
him.
around him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is a shame.
Yeah,
I think points probably 1 point may have been on the
Maybe.
table if everything
Yeah.
went perfect.
Yeah.
But it didn't. And P13 is always the best you can do at that point.
Yeah, no doubt. Latifi had a slow stop, said they just lacked a lot of pace to make an impact despite a good qualifying for Albon. But yeah, so there you go.
It was a
What can you say?
Latifi race.
It was a Latifi race, a very Latifi race. Let's see. AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, P14, Yuki Tsunoda, DNF. Brutal weekend for the team. Gasly was told right at the very beginning to start lifting and coasting due to heat. I don't know what happened there. Felt like he did I don't know. Just really tough. But I think he's staying at AlphaTauri, which is good news. But he tried that early pit stop, then got caught out by the virtual safety car. That dropped him back in the field, out of the points. Couldn't make it back up there. Just a tough weekend for Pierre. And I'm not quite sure what's happened there because he's a better driver than that.
Yeah, handcuffed by the team, I think. I mean, well, you can't do anything if you're lifting, coasting, and being in a race. I mean, you're pretty much leaving yourself out there to just kind of finish a race, but
yeah, no doubt.
And hope for the best of something happening. But
yeah, tough for the Ukester. He was having a better race, but exited the pits after a second stop. He exited the pits like a bat out of hell and ran straight into the wall. Very junior mistake on cold tires, and Franz is having a bad enough weekend with Pierre and their car troubles, and then for Ukester to come flying out of the pit, not even make the turn, just go boom right into the wall. That was bad.
Yeah, that is bad. I mean, in the IMSA stuff, we're always emphasizing pit in, hot pit out. You every single time you practice coming in as fast as you can, leaving as fast as you can, no matter what the program is. So it's ingrained in your mind. Problem with this weekend was obviously the changeable conditions. So you probably didn't get to practice the in and outs as many times, but it was surprisingly different entry speed going into one than anyone else was achieving after getting their new tires on. So Yuki got it very, very wrong. I give him a little bit of credit just because he didn't get to practice too much, but not a lot of credit. He went like 120% over the speed limit at that point to make that turn. Yeah,
he kind of hopped out. Oops, sorry.
France, where are you?
Yeah. And finally, Haas, Schumacher, DNF, Kevin Magnussen, P17. Paul, I'm not sure how you go from best qualifying ever for the team to a DNF and last, but Haas managed it.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Schumacher had a good race going, great qualifying for the young man, good race going in the points, but parked it with a DNF. And then Kevin had a good race going, picked up some front wing damage, which prompted the FIA race stewards to give him a black and white and force, or black and orange, was it maybe? To force
black and orange,
to force him to pit to replace the front wing. Kevin said that's just not right. He said the stewards are way too easily influenced. He said basically I had a scratch on the front wing. The car was fine to drive. It felt fine. And for everybody, oh yeah, I can see it's flopping all over the place.
It hit me in the head.
Yeah, I'm gonna die out here, and Kevin's like, that's way too influenced. It had a little M piece that was dangling, but it was fine.
Well, we are seeing a change on the ideology behind the stewards for sure.
Yeah.
We're talking about the taping of the wing last week.
Yeah.
And now you have to come in and change your wing when maybe before they would have kind of let it go.
Right.
But it's a legitimate problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's easy to say, well, it wasn't affecting my pace. Well, that's not really why they brought you in. Not because of your pace, it's because of what potentially could happen if that wing flap comes off.
Yeah, it's a piece of carbon fiber flying at 100 miles an hour.
Right. It's like where do you draw the line between safety and just let them run what's going on out there? And it's very frustrating for Kevin. I understand it completely, but
for sure.
You know, with the different stewards this year, it just seems like they're kind of making some decisions to kind of stamp their authority on how things are going to run, and they've been consistent, at least, and we've always asked for consistency. So we saw that with the wing last week. We're seeing it with his little front wing end plate this week. Kevin, you did it to yourself.
Yeah, you don't want to box prematurely. Don't hit Lewis.
Yeah, exactly. Fight, fight when there's a fight.
Yeah, right.
Trying to pass Lewis on the outside going in turn 4 at Canada is a no-win option. I promise you that. And so, I think he brought it on himself. It's frustrating, absolutely. But then the pit stop was dodgy anyway to change the wing.
That wasn't good.
It just kind of added insult to injury, really. But Kevin, it was your fault that the wing end plate got off, and these are the new rules you guys are racing by. So get used to it.
That's it, man. Get over it, man. All right. That's what we think of the teams and the drivers. But what do we think of the race? Well, we have awards for the race. The first one is Move of the Race.
We'll do it live!
All right, Paul. Move of the race. Who'd you have?
I've got Charles Leclerc on his little hairpin passes. I liked the fact that he was choosing, when I was talking about science, he was choosing places to pass that where people weren't expecting. Everyone's expecting you to run in behind and pass on the DRS zone, but screw that. Charles is down. He's taking it deep,
Yeah.
So I appreciated that, and he made it work a couple of times. So it was fun. It was fun to watch. I'm sure the people at the hairpin, not the best place to watch at Canada, as we spoke about. I think turn 1, 2, 3, 4 complex is the best, but there was some action there, and Charles made it exciting for him.
Yeah, for sure. I had Carlos versus Max. I just thought that whole battle was intriguing as hell, and a great exercise, and just fantastic attacking and defending, and I just thought it was a lot of fun to watch. So I had that. Next award is Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live! Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough!
All right. I think we're aligned on this one.
I think we are. I have a near donkey of the race after that, but I'm picking Yuki. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a small mistake. That was a big mistake.
That was big. Yeah.
Yuki, you were going so well this season, and all of a sudden you're killing me.
You're killing me. I know. That's who I had as well.
Yeah.
That was bad.
All right. I'm gonna give an honorable mention to the new commentator for this week anyway on the F1 TV app. Did you actually
I haven't listened to it yet.
Okay.
No.
I told you to listen. You won't last long, but listen to a couple of laps of the commentary team on F1 TV. I think Joyland's fine, but Tom something or whatever his name is, I've heard him before, that didn't like him before, but boy, having to listen to him for 2 hours, I was nearly gonna scratch my fingernails on a chalkboard to make me feel better. It was so irritating. So irritating. He just emphasized every other word, which didn't have any meaning to what I was talking about. Before we had Captain Kirk, now we got the overemphasizer. Jesus Christ.
Somehow. Yeah, so I got, we had on Sky Sports, we had Danica Patrick.
Oh, dear.
Danica, well, she did, every time I see Danica, she's, I'm sure she's a lovely person, but I always forget how tiny she is.
She's a wee little thing. Yeah.
She is a wee little thing. She must be 5 foot, maybe.
Yeah, pretty much.
But, because she's standing next to drivers that I know are smaller drivers, and she's so small. And that just reminded me of that one time when she was pissed, and she had every right to be, and it was at NASCAR. She jumped out of that ar. She was going down that stretch. She's going to kick some ass, man. And I just thought that was,
hold me back.
Hold me back, man. Come at me, bro. That was great. Good for her. But anyway. She was there. But it was great to have JB back. Love having Jensen, because Jensen knows his shit. and he's really good at it. So it's
Okay.
good to have him on Sky. All right, and then finally, do we have one more? We do. Driver of the
Do.
race.
Yesterday, Lewis.
Yes. Get in
But
there,
it wasn't Lewis.
It wasn't. I chose Max.
Nicely done.
Yeah. I thought that was a very, very good drive. Especially on
Very
the commercial.
difficult drive. Very
tough
difficult.
to do.
Yeah,
to
very
do.
tough to lead, especially in the DRS world. So yeah.
And the strategy they threw at him,
Mhm.
that second stop, he comes out behind Lewis. He's, why'd you put me in there? And his team was didn't have the pace.
No, that was
My God,
Lewis.
I'm gonna get
That
the
was
pace.
to Lewis, not to Verstappen.
Yeah.
The not have
right.
the pace one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm giving it to Charles Leclerc.
Good
I
call.
thought he did a great job. I think, it was unfortunate he wasn't able to make that move on Ocon to get an even
Yeah.
better result. But I think overall, coming from the back to where he did, frustrating as it is, making the moves he was, Mr. Excitement, I enjoyed his drive.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he got around Ocon. He had a lot of fresh air beyond Ocon, and it would have been very interesting because I think he was podium material.
Yeah,
in
I
my
think
mind.
so too.
And it would have been good to see. Can you imagine Max trying to hold two Ferraris off?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because he would have been right there.
That would have been really
That pace
interesting.
car would have been fantastic for Charles.
Yeah, and what would have Mattia done if Charles is on Carlos's tail? Tough call. So anyway, that would have been throwing the
pulling
cat
his hair
amongst the
out.
pigeons. So
Yes.
anyway, all right, let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
All right, so Miles wants to know this, Paul. Because I'm not qualified. I have strong opinions, of course, but I'm not qualified. But anyway,
Yeah.
Miles asked this. Near the end of the race, the commentators were commenting that Perez might be setting his car up for qualifying while Max is setting up for the race. What does this actually mean, and how much difference is there in a car if you set up for qualifying versus setting up for the race?
Well, I mean, yeah. So aero is a big part, right? You can set a car up to achieve a better velocity, and with a fresh set of tires, you've got that little bit of extra grip that's going to make up for that lack of aero grip. So you got the fast down the straight, and you got the fresh tires to maximize it. It's something that you can maybe make work for a lap or two, but ultimately that's on to the deficit, trying to run stints, which is obviously what you have to do during a race. You can do stuff with gearing. F1 doesn't usually. The rules are kind of locked in, but used to be that you could run a different gearing for qualifying and different gearing for a race, because when you're dicing and racing with people, not just driving around for a lap time, you need different tools. You need to be able to come off a corner perhaps to be able to make a move, get a bit of extra speed down the straight perhaps. So your gearing can change depending on, it's about raceability really. It's about making the car last over a longer stint rather than a single lap. So the way the suspension is set up also, sometimes you set the suspension up to put a lot of energy in the tire initially, which is great for a single 1-2 lap portion, but ultimately that will make the tire fall off earlier in a stint, and therefore you'll be struggling at the end, and the overall lap time would actually, or overall time, but from beginning and end of the stint will actually be less. Even though you started off that stint being faster, you would be more slower at the end, and you would actually lose that deficit more to your other competitors.
And it must be said, Paul, you guys do, even in IMSA, a sport car, very similar. I mean, you guys can trim it out for qualifying for a qualifying position, but then you can also, trim it out for long run pace and overall stint and protection of the car and tires and everything else. So,
and sometimes you make compromises on maybe even full stint pace for track position. Right. So and qualifying. I mean, in IMSA, we're not in a Parc Fermé situation, so we're able to change our suspension and our aero stuff between a qualifying run and the race. So we're able to do actually more than Formula One teams do. When a Formula One team has to lock it in. So if you're locking it in, then you're really making a commitment to qualifying versus race, more so in Formula One than even us.
And I think that's kind of the point what Miles is asking for, and I think that's a key element is that if track position on quali is kind of what you're going for, and you're locked in there, so you've got to have a decent strategy to overcome that setup a little more for quality than race.
So a track that's hard to pass on.
Yeah,
you're willing to stack a little bit more percentage on that single lap pace,
like
to get you
Monaco
that track position. But if you're a track like Monza, you're like, qualifying nearly doesn't mean anything. You've got to have a car that's going to run a full stint.
Yeah. So great question, Miles.
It is a great
appreciate that.
Yeah.
And Paul, can we talk about what you guys are signed up? What you guys are going to be doing at Heart of Racing?
Yeah. No, some exciting stuff coming up. When we're pretty busy. Next week we're at Watkins Glen. Then we're going to be at next week we're going to be in Canada ourselves at Mosport, and a couple of other races along the way. But very soon, at the end of July, we are going to the place with its own microclimate, Spa itself. So the Heart of Racing.
24 hours of
Spa versus all those Europeans. I'm going to put my European disco shirt on, but I'm so excited to go and do this race. It's really, really cool. Hopefully it's the beginning of more European races for the Heart of Racing team, but this is kind of dipping our toe in the water. And I think, as I said, we'll see how it goes, but it's just going to be exciting just to be at Spa and definitely racing with the team. So super.
Okay, you got to take a lot of pictures for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna heading up that hill, man. Gonna be no Rouge. Yeah.
You'd be like Kate Bush running up that hill.
Yes. So now European listeners can come say hi to me.
Yes.
If you're allowed in the paddock in the Euro races, I have no idea. Part of the learning process, I think.
There you go. If you live in Europe and you're going to the 24-hour Spa, Paul will be there, so you can go see him. And Heart of Racing, and that is so cool. That is so cool that you're going to Spa. That's one track I'd love to go to. So that's going to be super cool. So be sure to check Paul out. 24 hours. They've done 24 Daytona. 12 hours of Sebring. Now they're doing 24 Spa. You know what's got to be next. So, anyway, great. That's great, Paul.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, that does it for this podcast. Be sure to share your opinion. As always, the rule since 2005 is do it with decorum and civility, which means no personal attacks. Disagree all you want. That's perfectly fine. I'm not the Delphic Oracle of Formula One. You can
do not shove people off the track just because you've got mango.
Yeah, you just come up and shove you off a pavement. It's like Hale's grannies. So anyway, do that over at theparcfermé.com. If you like the podcast, go over to iTunes, give us some love, give us good ratings over there. We could not do this podcast or website without the generous support of our Patreon supporters. So I am incredibly grateful to all of you for your support. So thank you so much for doing that. If you've ever felt compelled to support us, you can go to our website, theparcfermé.com. On the right-hand side it says support us. Click on there and you can go support us. And you could do that for as little as $1 a month. And
it's the price of actually, you can't buy a cup of coffee for $1.
You can't buy a cup of coffee for $1. It's cheaper than coffee.
It's
folks.
Cheaper than coffee.
That's right. So anyway, great to have you on, Paul, and back to back. Yes. So next thing we're going to be talking about is your home race, my friend, the British Grand Prix. That should be exciting.
That's why I got the Queen back there.
Yeah, I see.
There you go.
The Queen there.
God save the Queen.
There you go. That's awesome. Well, we'll talk to you then. And next week, I will try to find Grace. We'll come back and talk about all the news in Formula One. Until that time, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.